I'm torn back and forth. Beautiful was the time at home, with the parents and with friends, the many hours together in the circle of loved ones, and also the longer sessions at the pub. Those were good and memorable times. You know what you're fighting for, and it encourages you to keep the fight against Bolshevism going, the fight for our people, our country, and our families. It would be unthinkable if the brown hordes would flood our pretty patch of land, and people you love would have to live as a slave of labor under the whip of such political commissars. But the price is high. We serve with blood and iron. A lot of blood has already been spilled on both sides. But there has to be an end sometime. The Russian will have to give up after these devastating losses along his front lines. He has lost so much land. Already hundreds of thousands of dead and just as many prisoners had to mourn. Destroyed material lies everywhere, but again and again new vehicles and tanks from invisible factories in the Urals are coming to the front. The stubborn fighting will hopefully end soon. The summer offensive seems to be progressing well. We are advancing everywhere. Now I must look ahead. My comrades are certainly awaiting me already. An inner anticipation takes hold of me. What's waiting for me? Who is still there? Who has fallen for the fatherland? What's Isolde doing? Do we now finally have the long cannons for our Panzer force entirely, and not just as field trails? Many questions occupy me, but now I have to function again and stand against the Russians by my comrades' side. Hour after hour, it's going with the train through German territory. It's beautiful. Everything is gleaming in summer-like glory. The fields are standing well under the hands of the faithful farmers and are reaping the best from the soil that it has to offer. The forests with their roofs of leaves are reaching for the sun and are hardly comprehensible in their vastness. Past large lakes and small elevation, it's going toward the east. The former rice border is crossed, and now further, even further, it's going across the land that we wrestled away from Stalin. By way of Gommel and Białystok, it's going toward Charkiv. When I arrive, there's a hustle and bustle in the city. From here, the supplies for the ongoing offensive at the front are being moved on. Apparently, everything is going in a southerly direction. I'm being advised to find a transport train that's headed towards Stalingrad. My regiment was covering enormous distances while fighting. It turns into a gamble trying to find the staff. Then in the vicinity of Nikolagevka, by chance, I notice a transport train hauling damaged tanks. A few tank soldiers are visible, and I inquire with them about my regiment. Another 80 kilometers south along the main supply road, I should be able to find my unit. With a truck down dusty roads, I finally reach my destination. All in all, it takes 3 days until I'm back with my troop. Quickly, I discover them in a small village because Private Schmidt happens to cross my path. It turns into a happy reunion, and off we go to the regimental office. We have to tell each other quite a bit. He wants to know all about the homeland. Of course, he wants an exact description of how it was in the military hospital and whether I'm once again fully ready for action. As I report to the Sarge and relate to him that I'm already looking forward to my crew. The regiment is relatively complete in deployment and was able to score enormous successes. Just recently, 9 locomotives and a freight train full of grain were captured during an advance. That is always the reward for the risk during fast advances. My Isolde is still underway. I am to help out with the repair unit. The quarters are quite alright. One can't complain. My right leg is still bothering me a little, but it's slowly getting better. Repairing tanks gives one the opportunity to learn a lot about the technology. Who knows, this could possibly be useful to me someday. We are repairing a Panzer III, in which the commander was injured and the gunner killed by an anti-tank rifle fire. Those crocs will lie in an ambush and wait till you've passed them. Then 3 to 4 rounds will be blasted into the side of the tank and the gang will escape. The projectiles won't always penetrate, but if they do, well, we are repairing the turret and are replacing the defective parts with components of another damaged tank, which is supposed to be returned to Germany. 2 days later, Isolde is still in the field. I'm slowly getting nervous. I tell Schmidt he should go ahead and place me on the replacement list. Since I'm really a tank gunner and not a mechanic, I'd like to get out again. Right the next morning, I'm assigned to a Panzer III to make an advance into an unsecured sector. Here, only few infantry forces are deployed in securing the front in order to counter the threat to the flank from the northeast. Since the front line is too thin, the Russians once in a while manage to get through with his light armored reconnaissance vehicles. According to the description, it's probably BA-10s with a 45mm gun. Those are fast, maneuverable and a nuisance for the infantry. Therefore, 3 Panzer IIIs are placed into a battle group, then we are off toward the front line. By now it's the Kalmyk steppe, we are moving in flat terrain. We are making good progress with the tanks. During a rest stop, the battle group commander explains to us what he intends to do. He wants to lay an ambush and use an apparently defective tank as a bait. Well said and done. By evening, we've located a suitable location that's well visible for the Russians. We set up a tank and a truck next to it. It's supposed to look as if the tank was damaged and the repair platoon wants to take it in tow. Behind the tank, ditches for the truck crew are constructed so they can get into cover in case of an attack. The rest of us are hiding our tanks well camouflaged in small depressions in the landscape behind brush, which isn't too easy due to the sparse vegetation. It takes till noon, then the scout planes of the Russians are above us. Hopefully we won't get any artillery, otherwise it's over. But we sit and wait for now. Toward 3 p.m. we can see them coming. 3 BA-10s are approaching our damaged tank at a fast pace. The forward positioned infantry soldiers open fire from their foxholes, but the fast Russian reconnaissance vehicles aren't fazed by this. Now everything happens really fast. Enemy infantry appears on the battlefield and pushes into our defensive positions. So far the Russians are unaware of what's going on. Only when the first vehicle blows apart in a ball of fire do they realize their situation. The crew of the damaged tank fires into the rows of the approaching Russians. The 50mm high explosive rounds are cutting bloody trails into the attackers. Now we move up and break from cover. Meanwhile, 5 BA-10s are already racing like the devil across the hard steppe ground and are trying for their part to reach the truck and the tank. The truck is Swiss cheesed by machine gun fire. Our men are lying in their foxholes safely behind the tank. We engage the enemy vehicles and hit. Our bow machine gun shoots at the wheels and the 50mm holes in between. First shot to immobilize, then fire to annihilate. Now the Russians are catching on to what's being played. 3 Russian armored vehicles are already sitting burning on the battlefield. One attempts with damaged tires to turn, is then finally hit and remains standing. The Russians are jumping out but don't get far. In the machine gun bursts of our infantry, the men are being riddled with holes and die. One vehicle is still intact and drives like the devil back to its own lines. We stop and shoot, but the vehicle is simply too maneuverable. We don't get it. In the crossfire from our foxholes, the retreating Russian hordes are collapsing. The last vehicle drives back, zigzagging in order not to get hit. I aim and take my time to shoot it as well. Just a blink of an eye before the shot, the BR-10 rears up and rolls over. Well then, finished, I think, and we drive on up to our damaged tank. Here everything is alright so far. 2 soldiers are wounded, but it's nothing severe. On we go to our foxholes. Here we employed 3 men per dugout. Now it becomes apparent to me what had stopped the final armored reconnaissance vehicle. It drove into a foxhole at full speed and had killed all 3 men in it. That was caused the rollover. Only 1 Russian survived the accident. Damn it, what bad luck. Well then, more than 40 dead Russians and 5 BR-10s have been eliminated. With that, it will remain quiet here for now, and we can leave the sector of the front. The next day we return to the regiment. When we arrive, several long-barreled Panzer IV and our Isolde are sitting around the regimental staff area. Later, I also find our radio operator Peter, and I'm happy to have found another familiar face. It's a merry, get our throat wet evening. We treat ourselves to a glass of wine for the reunion.